Hi, my name is Kylie Kite, and this is my presentation for drawing landscapes digitally. For this project, my goals were to design and digitally paint 4 separate landscape paintings. I have always loved to photograph and appreciate beautiful landscapes all of my life, even as a child. And even as a child, I have always loved to draw or paint them, but I've had one small problem. My problem was that I never felt like I could do the views justice in capturing their beauty. Everything that I did looked flat and never had any dimension to it. So now it was time for me to try again. This time I wanted to recreate some beautiful landscapes, but I was going to try to do it digitally this time. The very first step for this project was tons and tons of research. For each of the 4 photos, I needed to find some reference photos for inspiration and create a mood board. Painting 1 of the project was to recreate a painting that I did back in 1999 when I was 15 years old, only it needed a better composition and for sure more dimension. After creating multiple thumbnail sketches and having some time to think in between each of them, I finally decided that this was going to be the best composition for my new painting. I wanted for it to have a pier, mountains, a sailboat in the distance, and then greenery that wrapped around the edge of the photo. Painting 1 proved to be my wake-up call. This was definitely not going to be as simple as I first thought that it was going to be. Here was my first attempt at painting 1. The whole color scheme doesn't work. The water looks way too rough. Overall, the only thing that I'm really happy with was the sailboat. After several more hours with this piece, I did modify the color scheme, changed the mountains, worked on the water some more, but it's still not where I want for it to be. Okay, we're getting a whole lot closer. I did modify the greenery. I wanted to make sure that there was some warmth in the background, a cooler foreground, and happiness and warmth out in the distance where the sailboat was going to be headed. So here we are, painting 1's final. I'm really happy with how the piece turned out. The water turned out to be much cooler with a bluer foreground. Out in the distance, it definitely looks more inviting. The greenery, the shapes, the textures of the mountains, the clouds, and the birds. I'm really happy with how painting 1 turned out. Now it's time for us to work on painting 2. This photo or painting was going to be based on a heron photo that I took during an afternoon on the lake as a family. My struggle was that I was not 100% happy with the composition of photo, so definitely was going to have to make some adjustments there. And just like painting 1, painting 2 required that I did several thumbnail sketches and took some time in between. This was the final composition that I was going to shoot for initially. As I started blocking in the colors, I realized that everything was in the center. We needed to move some stuff around for the rule of thirds. Okay, so the composition definitely looks better. We've got the mountains about a third of the way down the page. The reeds come up at about a third of the way. The heron sits on the line about a third of the way. But I'm still not pleased with this sepia color tone. After using some of the same color palette from painting 1, painting 2 is definitely starting to take shape. At this point, I don't like the mountains, so we still need to work on that, and the clouds need some more work. Here we are, painting 2's final. After some minor revisions on the previous piece, I now have a piece that I'm happy with. The heron is definitely front and center of the piece, with the sunbeams inviting and drawing in the viewer. The cattails, with all of the reflections and the peeps of sun, keep the eye focused on the front of the piece. Then as the eye does linger around the back of the piece, the mountains have a warmth to them, and the life of the birds definitely make you want to trail off with this bird. Now it's time for painting 3. This one was going to be a little bit different. It's based on a sunset photo that I took over a soybean field near my home in North Carolina. I did want to make this painting a little less hazy than the photo, and I wanted to add more mountains in the background. Painting 3's thumbnail sketch was a little easier since I basically wanted to copy the photo and just make minor adjustments. If only it really was that easy to recreate a photo. This was attempt number 1 at the painting. There is absolutely no depth at all, and you can't tell where the soybeans and the background vegetation begin and end. It needs a lot of work. But I finally made it to painting 3's final picture. With the final piece, I started in the middle of the painting. I put the background vegetation in first with a smaller brush size. Then as the soybean field was put in, I started with a tiny brush size and made it bigger as I come toward the foreground. Then it was a matter of putting in the mountains and all of the sky. All of this was created with brushes in Photoshop, and no, none of it is photo overlays. As this project has moved on, I definitely feel like I've become more and more familiar with the program and a lot happier with my work. So Painting 4 is going to be based on the sunset that I got to enjoy on the lake one afternoon when I was fishing. But I am definitely struggling with some self-confidence here. Am I actually going to be able to pull off these reflections on the water? So as my thumbnail sketch indicates, my goals going into this was basically to recreate the photo that I had taken with the digital painting. I did want to add a sun more in the background, and then I wanted to put in some vegetation on the left and right of the painting to draw the viewer in. I will say that this was the easiest of all of the paintings. I think it was because I had so much time and experience in messing up the first 3. This was the first attempt at this one, and overall I'm really happy with it. It definitely still needs some refinement though. One of the biggest issues that I wasn't happy with was the trees in the background. There was no dimension to it at all. I don't know what it looked like, but it needed some different color variants to make it actually look like some trees. But here I am, I finally made it to Painting 4. After I got those trees straightened out in the background, I worked on the reflections a little bit more in the water, added more contrast in some darker areas, then I refined some on the clouds. I did add a vignette around the edges to make it have more of a photo type feel, even though it is a painting. And I was accused of putting photo overlays in this. All of this was created with brushes in Photoshop. There's no photo overlays. So what did I learn through all of this? Let's look at the paintings in summary again. Overall, in this project with Painting 1, I had to start over about 100 times. So I learned how complex Photoshop can be, but I also learned that with some time and patience and a lot of hard work, you can learn a program. I'm really happy with all of the textures in the mountains and the greenery and even the water. With Painting 2, I'm just in love with this parrot. I never would have dreamed that when I took that photo that I was going to be using it to create digital paintings in the future. But this guy, he's definitely inspirational. It makes me feel like I'm sitting back in the woods on a bank somewhere, peeping through and looking at what this heroine's up to. Painting 3, I learned that it's all about brush size and changing things around and experimenting. Painting 4, definitely I struggled with that self-confidence, but I did it. The reflections on the water are there, the colors are there, and again, it was all about the brushes, taking the time to adjust the transparency as I worked, using smaller and bigger brush sizes to make it actually look not like a painting and fake, but more of a photorealism effect. And look at all those sketches that went into Photo 1. And even more sketches that went in for Photo 2. Wow, and yes, sketches for Photo 3. And you guessed it, even more sketches for Photo 4. All before I even started on the computer with any of the paintings. My takeaway with this project is that new things take time. You have to take the time to research, to consider, to sketch some more, start with some composition sketches, and not to be afraid to change and try things as it goes. Better yet, just have fun. You never know what you're going to learn, and I'm sure that we're going to surprise ourselves, just like I surprised myself with each of these photos. I never ever would have realized that these paintings would be as close to the originals as they are. So that's it for this project. I did it. I created 4 digital paintings with a program that I had never used before, never drawing digitally before. I hope that you were inspired. I hope that you'll try something new yourself. Remember to take time, be patient with yourself, work through those self-confidence issues, and it's okay. I hope that you will check out my website and follow my work in the future. Thanks again for watching this.